Hello guys, and welcome back. Today, we'll be learning about the parts of an animal cell. I promise, I'll keep it simple for you. Now let's dive in. All cells are filled with a liquid called cytoplasm. And yes, this is actually what it looks like under a microscope. Cytoplasm is made of water, salts, and various biomolecules. This water often helps the organelles do their job by starting chemical reactions. Organelles are all the parts of a cell. They float in the cytoplasm. Organelles are to a cell as organs are to an animal or plant. Let's learn about the organelles now. Floating everywhere in the cytoplasm are organelles called ribosomes. Their job is to take molecules called amino acids and stitch them into proteins. There are 500 kinds of amino acids, but only 20 are relevant to life. A specific sequence of amino acids is a type of protein. Think of it this way. Even though there are only 10 digits in our number system, you can combine them to form an endless variety of numbers. The same is true for amino acids forming proteins. There can be up to 10 million ribosomes in a human cell, and for good reason. Proteins are the building blocks of life. In the middle of the cell, there's an organelle called a nucleus. It's filled with a liquid called nucleoplasm, in which there are two objects, the nucleolus and the chromatin. Let's look at the chromatin first. DNA is a type of molecule that carries all information needed for a cell. All living things use it. An individual DNA molecule is called a chromosome. An animal chromosome may be a few feet long, but proteins called histones manage to squeeze it into an ultra-tiny space. It's like taking a rope the length of Texas and squeezing it into a 16-foot wide sphere. It's insane, right? All the chromosomes and histones combined are called chromatin. While the number of chromosomes and their sizes vary among different species, all sexually reproducing living things, that is, complex ones like animals, plants, and fungi, when they mate, each parent copies half their chromosomes and passes it to the child. Two halves, of course, make one whole set of DNA. Simpler organisms like bacteria reproduce asexually. They just copy and paste themselves, no mating required. So an asexually reproducing living thing just copies its whole set of DNA and passes it to the child. As the organelle that contains all the DNA and therefore all the information, the nucleus is the command center of the cell. Molecules come in all the time to fetch instructions. We'll talk more about them later. There are two membranes, the outer and inner membrane. The outer membrane has nuclear pores, which let the molecules in, and the space between the two membranes has proteins that regulate the traffic of molecules coming into the nucleus. Also, the organelle that creates the ribosomes is called the nucleolus, and it floats inside the nucleus, next to the chromatin. But how does this DNA get to the ribosomes? An enzyme called RNA polymerase enters the nucleus when it receives signals that some ribosome needs instruction. It copies the part of the DNA that has the necessary instructions, creates a new information-carrying molecule called mRNA, and pastes the information into the mRNA. Then the mRNA is sent to the ribosome, and after the ribosome reads the instructions, the mRNA just breaks down and later can be recycled into new mRNA. This is why mRNA is only the messenger and not the main information-carrying molecule. It's unstable and temporary. Surrounding the nucleus is a structure called the endoplasmic reticulum, or ER. It has two parts, the rough ER and smooth ER. Both are stuffed full of sacs called cisternae. The rough ER is studded with ribosomes. That's why it's rough. The ER as a whole is the largest organelle in the cell. It has three main functions: combining and modifying proteins, using proteins to make and store other important molecules like lipids and carbohydrates, and sending molecules to a different organelle, which we'll talk about later, inside little boxes called transport vesicles. Speaking of vesicles, a vesicle is a structure that is enclosed in two layers of lipid molecules. That's called a lipid bilayer. There are five main types of those: vacuoles, which store water and other important substances; lysosomes, which destroy garbage; peroxisomes, which digest nutrients; transport vesicles, which send things around the cell; and secretory vesicles, which send things out of the cell. Alright, remember that organelle I mentioned, which receives vesicles from the ER? It's the Golgi apparatus. Its job is to send transport and secretory vesicles throughout and out of the cell, wherever and whenever needed. It is also made of sacs called cisternae. The lumen is the area filled with cisternae, the dark green part. The cis face is the side that faces the ER, taking in vesicles, and the trans face is the other side. It sends the vesicles everywhere. But where does the cell get the energy for all these functions? It's through the mitochondria. There can be hundreds in a cell, and each one has DNA and ribosomes of its own. Mitochondria contain two membranes that are folded in shapes called cristae to maximize surface area for energy production. The outer membrane fully surrounds the inner membrane, the latter of which is less penetrable. The space between the two is the intermembrane space. The space inside the inner membrane is the matrix, where the energy production takes place. Basically, a flow of subatomic particles pulls together a molecule called ATP, which contains a lot of energy in its bonds. So when it's broken down, the energy can be released. Fun fact, humans use their body weight in ATP every day. The cytoskeleton is the structural framework that holds the cell together. It's made of strong proteins called microtubules. When a cell divides and gives birth to a new cell, the centriole is the organelle that arranges the newborn cell's organelles, including the cytoskeleton. Let's recap. We learned about the main parts of the animal cell and their functions: cytoplasm, nucleus, ribosomes, endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi apparatus, vesicles, mitochondria, cytoskeleton, and centrioles. Just a note here. When I'm explaining these parts of a cell, it may seem like they're conscious and they're willfully going around and doing their jobs, but that is not the case. Everything in the cell happens purely due to chemical reactions. Also, there are multiple copies of many organelles in a cell. The only organelles of which there are one of are the nucleus, the cytoskeleton, and the endoplasmic reticulum. All other organelles, there can be like hundreds of them in a cell. I hope you liked this video. Thanks for watching. And as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Bye, see you next time. And what I said just applies to animal cells. Yes, many of these organelles can be found in other kinds of cells too. And even though my video applies only to animal cells, many of these organelles can be found in other kinds of cells too.